guys, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't seen my previous video or you aren't sure, you haven't seen any of my content this month, August is National Family History Month, and so some of the content I've got going up this month is genealogy and family history related. This is my second video for the month. If you didn't see last week's video, it was a flip through of my family history folders, and so this week's video is a little sort of tutorial, I suppose, on how I use Trove. So the newspaper digitization database run by the National Library, on how I use Trove to research my family and find articles and learn more about them and just discover stories that you won't necessarily find in the other records. I love using Trove. I not only use it for family history research, but I also used it when I was writing my local history book. And over the years, I've kind of figured out a bit of a routine for how I use Trove to do my research and what I search and what specifics I put in order to find who I'm looking for and what I'm looking for. It probably goes without saying that your success at using Trove to find your ancestors will depend on where they lived and really when they lived. If they lived in the back blocks of nowhere and the local newspaper and the nearest newspaper was like 100 kilometers away, like they might not appear in it, or they might live in the back blocks of nowhere and they did actually have a local newspaper that came out once a week, but that newspaper hasn't been digitized yet. And then also the same goes with if they lived in the city but had a very common name, you're probably going to struggle narrowing down which articles are actually about them. So I want to share with you guys some tips and ways that I do things in order to be able to narrow down who I'm related to and get that information from Trove. So yes, let's just cut now to my screen capture.
Okay, so welcome to the Trove homepage. If you're familiar with Trove, you're probably very familiar with this homepage, and if Trove is still very new to you, well, this is what it looks like. I actually use Trove quite a lot and quite regularly, and a lot more often than I thought I would. Not only do I use Trove for family history research, which I tend to dip in and out of month by month. Sometimes I'll just be bitten by the bug and do like a week's worth of research on a particular branch of the tree before, going back to real life and everything like that. But because I'm also involved with my local history museum, I run their social media, I tend to come on Trove to find little snippets and articles to use for flashbacks. So before we actually get into how I use Trove, let's just look at some statistics. So as you can see here, there are a lot of different indexes and databases that you can search in order to find sources relating to your family. So apart from the digitized newspapers, there's government gazettes, journals, articles and data sets, books, pictures, photos and objects, music, sound and video, maps, diaries, letters and archives, archived websites, people and organizations, and lists. Now, Trove very nicely just gives you the statistics that they have on their website, and there are a lot of records on here. And more importantly, look at how many newspapers and articles there are. That is a lot, and that's a scary number to search through, if I'm being completely honest. Like, just imagine if you actually had to go through all of them. What is actually amazing though is the fact that Trove provide all this for free. You can search all this for free, you can download everything for free. Like, it's crazy that there is so much available for absolutely nothing. So let's start off with searching. Now, I know most of you probably just want to click straight onto digitized newspapers and search right here, which is great because if I'm being honest, most people are going to be utilizing the newspapers, but you never know, you could be super fortunate enough to have your ancestors mentioned in these other archives. So it's really important that when you are first starting off, either all together or starting off with a particular ancestor, that you do search all of the databases, because you don't want to be missing out on something that is truly amazing. So for this, I'm going to be searching my fourth great-grandfather, William Hogan. William's family tree is super interesting. I think he's definitely on my favorite branch of the tree. There are so many interesting people and stories in that branch, and I definitely think it's a favorite. Don't get me wrong, I love all branches of my family tree and there are interesting stories across the board, but this branch in particular is very interesting. So let's see what comes up when we search for William. So straight off the bat, we have quite a lot of results. Over 1,000 books, 200 photos, over 270,000 newspaper articles, 6,000 journals and articles, 12,000 government gazettes, 23 maps, 280 music and sound records, 82 diaries, and 349 lists, as well as 20 people and organisations. That can be a lot to go through and kind of a bit overwhelming. But we can narrow this down even more. My first major tip for searching is don't just search their name straight. Put it in quotation marks. That way you are only going to be searching for articles where the name William Hogan appears, instead of articles where both William and Hogan appear but like nowhere near each other, where you're talking about a completely other William and a completely other Hogan. So already we've narrowed down the results that we've got here, and that's good. There's still a lot, but it's a little less scary and a little more manageable. So we're just going to dive straight into the digitised newspapers. So we have nearly 5,500 articles, and that's still quite a lot to go through. It will take you a while if you were just to scroll through every single article to look for them. Again, we can narrow that down. This is where geography is going to be really important to you. Not only knowing where your ancestor lived, either the specific town or the general area, but also the surrounding areas, so you can figure out which newspapers are actually going to be of relevance to you. There are a couple of ways you can do this. The first really basic way to do this is to just type in the place name in the search. So let's go for Bundalong. So Bundalong is one of the areas where William eventually settled. And I know that there is articles for him on here, that's why I'm doing this. So there's 26 articles that refer to both William Hogan and somewhere contain Bundalong in them. I can probably say that these 26 articles, all of them do refer to my ancestors. Not specifically this William Hogan, because his son was also called William, but I can be sure that most of these are, like 99% of these articles that actually have William Hogan in them are probably the William Hogan I'm looking for. But we can narrow that down further, and by doing that we're going to be utilising the advanced search ability. So, pretty straightforward. You search their name, you come down here to the publication date. Now I always put their birth and their death year in, because obviously that's going to be the area that's obviously going to be the time frame that you're going to want to search to knock out all of those other people with the same name who weren't living in the same era. So William actually arrived here in Australia in 1857, so I'm actually just going to put 1857 instead of his birth year of 1821, simply because I don't need to be looking for articles from a time period when he actually wasn't even here in Australia to appear in articles. William then died in November 1907. I'm going to put 1908 just to try and cover getting those legal notices and probate results, and also just because it's the end of the year, sometimes things do get neglected and missed and are reported the following year. Now, you could totally narrow down the state or the newspapers that you want to search. I'm not going to do that. For starters, because William lived in northern Victoria, very close to the New South Wales border, some articles do actually appear in New South Wales newspapers, so I don't want to restrict myself to a state. Of course, if your ancestor definitely only lived in one state, in the middle of the state, nowhere near being mentioned in other newspapers in other states, narrow it down. You could also scroll through every single newspaper title and select the ones that are relevant to you. Again, I'm not going to do that. In Victoria alone, there are 366 titles. I don't really want to scroll through all of them, but I will still narrow it down, just not here. Finally, I then sort it to be the earliest first. That way you're in chronological order, and it's kind of a little bit easier to follow your ancestors' narrative. So we have 2,500 articles here. Again, you could totally go through all of these on their own without narrowing anything down any further. But I am actually going to narrow it down by title. I find it easier to do this after I've searched. That way you're only going through the newspapers and the titles where the name of your ancestor actually appears. Plus, I feel it's kind of good to see at a glance what titles are coming up, and maybe you'll be kind of reminded of a newspaper that was somewhat local to them. So this is where obviously geography and a bit of knowledge of the area do come into play, because you're going to want to select and open up newspapers that were somewhat local to your ancestor. So with William having lived in Benalla and around Bundalong and Yarrawonga, which are in northeastern Victoria, I'm going to want to be hitting those newspapers as well as the Southern Riverina border newspapers as well. So we'll start off with the Border Morning Mail, the Cobram Courier, the Benalla Standard, the Benalla Ensign and Farmers and Squatters Journal. Now I open all these in new tabs just so I can keep track of what I'm looking at. The Albury Banner and Wodonga Express, the Numurkah Leader, the North Eastern Ensign, and the Ovens and Murray Advertiser. I think that's about it. So then I will just go through and look at each individual title. It makes it a lot easier and a little bit less overwhelming if you're only looking at a couple of articles at a quick glance. So if we look at this article, you might be able to tell straight off the bat if the article is relevant or not, but of course you're probably going to have to open a majority of them. So this is a court case session. William Hogan was charged with being drunk and disorderly and was just charged with a caution. This doesn't really tell you much. This could totally be the William Hogan I am looking for. This could be his son, or this could just be a completely different William Hogan. It's articles like these where it is a little bit hard to determine whether or not they are actually talking about your ancestor, that it is better to save these to a possible file in order to come back to if you find other sources and resources and documents that either back up the article and confirm that they are your ancestor, or that completely negate the article as being someone related to you. So let's look at this one. So this article here is actually a really important one that particularly if your ancestors lived in a rural location, that you'll be able to use to help you with other sources, which I will show you in just a moment. So this is a local land board piece of advertising that lists out the people who are applying for different lands, in what parish, the allotment that they want, and the area of it. So obviously we have William Hogan here going for land in the parish of Bundalong, allotment number 26, which equates to 70 acres, and I don't really know what the two breakdown is of that, but he's going for 70 acres of land in the Bundalong region. Remember that, because we're going to come back to it. Okay, so here is an article from the Ovens and Murray Advertiser from the 10th of May 1879, and it's from the Beechworth Court. So a little quick story. If you follow my blog, you will probably already know this story, but I'll link to it below so you can go and read it for yourself. William had two younger brothers, James and Thomas, and they came out to Australia as well, and they lived together, and James and Thomas actually lived nearby on a farm together. And one night, Thomas and James kind of had a disagreement. Thomas was very down on his luck. James was quite successful. And Thomas got a little bit drunk and was threatening to shoot James. And eventually that is what happened. Thomas shot James at close range, close enough that his body caught alight and he eventually died. And so Thomas was put on trial for murder, and he was eventually charged with murder and sentenced to the Beechworth jail for execution. He was one of the final people to be executed in the Beechworth jail. It's a really obviously sad but really interesting story. So there was quite a lot of news coverage about Thomas and James, obviously Thomas in particular, as his court case occurred. So that's what this article is about. It's about the third day in court where they're continuing to look at the case of Thomas killing his brother. This obviously goes over 2 pages. If I just zoom out, we have a whole column down the side of the page here, and then on the second page it's like most of the page, although I'm pretty sure this eventually changes into like the next case that they were talking about in court. Yes, so here we get to the end of the article where they're sentenced to death, and then we get into the next court case, which we don't really need to worry about. So that's something you obviously have to pay attention with. When does your article kind of end and the next one begin? Because you don't really want to be trying to get this whole article and then realize majority of it isn't relevant to you. So when it comes to saving articles, Trove makes it really easy and gives you a whole bunch of different options of how you want to save it. So you can save it, you can either save an article, a page, or an issue, and save it as a JPEG, a PDF, or a text file. The text file is this bit here, which isn't necessarily always correct, because obviously it is something that other people correct, and it's just kind of how it interprets the text on the page. But it depends. If your actual copy of the article is really hard to read, then the text is going to be a good idea to also have. For me, I actually save all of my articles, most of my articles anyway, as a JPEG file, as the largest JPEG file. Now this actually takes up quite a lot of individual images, so I might actually reduce it down slowly to try and get a really good size that is still really good to read, but isn't too many individual files. What I do end up doing is inserting all of these images of different articles into a Word document. I label them accordingly, and then I print them off and put them in my file. So just for interest's sake, this is how I save the file. So when I'm saving the file, I will call it the title of the article, then the newspaper that it appeared in, and then I'll put the date. And I always include the actual day, which I think is really important because articles more often than not will refer to things in the past by saying it happened Friday last, which is not very helpful if you don't know the day that the paper is coming out. So then I save it. I'd actually end up going through and saving all of these as like 1, 2, 3 of that file until I get up to about here, because then we move into the next article and the next story and the next court case. This is actually a really good example of why you would possibly save this as a whole page. If this entire court article referred to just my case that I was interested in, instead of going through the other cases that they went through that day, I would actually save this as a page, because it does take up a majority of the page, and then you just print the page like that. It's also I also will occasionally save a whole issue of the newspaper if it's quite interesting, and I really love that that is an option that you can do. So then once you look through all of the relevant articles under this search term, under their full name, this is when you start using different name alternatives. Now, so firstly, it would be if they spelt their last name differently. Hogan is pretty much Hogan, there's really going to be no derivatives of Hogan, but if you have an ancestor that you may have seen in the records spelt their name slightly differently, give that a search. If William had a middle name, I would search his middle name as well, because obviously sometimes you're going to come up as your full name. In this case, so firstly, William is sometimes written as WM. Apparently they got lazy and removed all the letters in the middle of his name. So then you just repeat the process by going through the newspapers that are again relevant to the area that you are searching. Then I search with initial, and I would both search with just their first initial and then as well as their second initial. Obviously by doing this you're going to have quite a few articles pop up. Again, you just keep repeating the process with different name alternatives. When it comes to your female ancestors, obviously you're going to want to do their maiden name and then their married name, and I will just say more often than not, you're going to find your female ancestors under their husband's name. As for example, so William's wife was called Ellen. She would more often than not be under the searches for like Mrs. W. Hogan kind of thing. She's not actually going to pop up because there aren't really any articles for her, but that is something you're going to have to consider. Again, go through all the different names and try to put in as many different search terms as possible to hit all of the different articles, because obviously not every article about William Hogan is going to come up just with the search of William Hogan. So think outside the box and apply different terms and different alternatives in order to get the name that you want. So we're going to have just a quick look at Government Gazette. So in regards to William, he didn't really appear in any government gazettes, mainly because most of them are New South Wales government gazettes. He didn't live in New South Wales. However, a really interesting one. So Patrick Gleason is William Hogan's grandson. If I actually type in Lawrence Gleason, we should be able to find him. Yes, so here's one here here's a police gazette. So Patrick, another one of my favourite stories, which is on my blog, and I will link to that below. Patrick shot a woman who he had been in a relationship with, shot her in the arm. She eventually died the following day, and he was charged with manslaughter, serving 15 years at the Goulburn jail. So here is the police gazette where he was charged with murder. So that's, one interesting article, one interesting thing that you can find. The final thing I want to share with you guys is the maps. Now, you can't really search by name in the maps, but again, geography comes in handy, and we will type in Bundalong. If anyone doesn't know, Bundalong is just up the road from Yarrawonga on the Victorian-New South Wales border. So I always narrow this down to be freely available online. Obviously, I want to be able to access them here. And the one I want is, let's try this one here. So these actually work through the State Library of Victoria, these particular maps, obviously being in Victoria. Sometimes you're not going to find absolutely every map, so you're probably going to have more luck going through each of the state archives for maps, but we're going to look at this one anyway. So we'll go to this one here from 1887 because that's going to be of more relevance. Okay, so this is what the maps look like, and you have obviously all the different information here. It's Bundalong in the county of Moira. This is from 1887-ish. It's not necessarily the exact date, but it is around that time. So obviously keep that in mind, but you don't always actually need to know the date. Because if you have these numbers, so this is a similar article to what we saw before. This is William Hogan buying something in the parish of Bundalong of portions 26 and parts 26 and portions 24, 25 and 27, totaling 204 acres. So I'm pretty sure William's name actually does come up on this, but the numbers still are important. I know exactly where. No, it doesn't. Okay. So, oh, yes, it does. So, William's name actually does come up on this. We have it right here. So, what did it say? It said 26 and parts 24, 25, and 27. So, 26 and 24, 25, and 27. But yes, so you're either going to find a name on the map, which obviously makes searching so much easier if you can actually just see a name. However, if you're looking at maps that were before or after your ancestor lived there, you're going to want to go off the numbers if you know them. So it's very important to look at the land board and try to find sources that do tell you their numbers so you can find out exactly what they owned, which I think is so cool. So then what you can do, which is so amazing, is it's quite easy to look at the historical maps and find that exact location on current day maps. But it is so cool to actually see how land boundaries and roads haven't changed quite a lot, so you can kind of you can really track down these locations and go and visit them. So this is what currently looks like in Bundalong. Now, obviously the land looks a little bit different, but you can see the river still following the same lines that it does here. So if we zoom in, we are super fortunate in the fact that this is actually called Hogan's Road. This road is named after William. And his property was pretty much here. It's completely different in the modern day landscape. There are houses all over here. If we go into the satellite map, like that's what it looks like. Like this bit of farmland here is probably the only bit that is at all somewhat reminiscent to what William would have seen back in the day. So I think that is about it. Just remember to search as much as possible, to try and hit all different sorts of articles, and to not give up, I suppose. Like, just keep going. Don't let the number of articles you find, whether it be a lot or not many, deter you from continuing your search. obviously what you find is going to be dependent on where your ancestors lived, when they lived, and what they actually got up to. If they lived quite a quiet and secluded life, chances are they're not going to appear in the archives as much. If they were quite crazy and maybe going around killing people, as some of my ancestors obviously clearly did, you're going to find them more. And I cannot stress this enough, always keep coming back and searching for the ancestors you've already looked for. Trove is always adding new articles every single day. Things are getting digitized all the time. And so there are going to be articles and newspapers going up that are mentioning your ancestor that you've already searched for. So do keep coming back and keep searching. Family history is never complete. You're always going to be looking for stuff, and Trove is a really great place to keep coming back to.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that video and found it useful, and obviously just remember, just because I've tailored this to ancestor and family history research doesn't mean you can't use it for any sort of research on Trove. It is really just basic keyword searching and just giving you ideas of ways to search for things. You may already do this. If you are, you're probably not this far into the video, but yeah, you may already do this, or you may have already done some of what I've shared. Definitely try everything out. Obviously, the way as I said, the success is really going to depend on your ancestor and whether they made the news or not. But it is definitely a really good resource to try. So yeah, if you found this useful, please give it a thumbs up. I don't know if I'm going to have any more family history related content video wise, maybe blog post wise, I don't know. I'm going to link below to everything. Maybe next week I'll be back with another video. I don't really know. But if you do really enjoy this family history content, then please let me know, because I would love to share more stuff. I don't know what, but you know, just to talk about it and, you know, give people ideas, and we can sort of like chat and share ideas and things like that. Anyway, enough rambling. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys soon with another video. Bye!